Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is the April 2021 JTeen webinar, where we will be having a great conversation with Roey Kruvi from Moisha House. I'm not going to give too much away because he's going to have someone who's going to introduce him. But thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here, supporting our work. At the end of this conversation, I'm going to mention our conference as well. So stay tuned for that in case you don't know about it. But without further ado, I am going to introduce Mike Steckloff and also Samantha Vinicor Meinrath. I'm not going to make her speak, but the two of them have been a pleasure to work with as our board representatives for programming and resources, and they have created this wonderful initiative that has brought us to our presenter today. So thank you both, and Mike, take it away.
Thanks, Erica. So I'm so excited to welcome all of you today and to introduce you to my good friend, Roey Kruvi. I originally met Roey about 10 years ago when we both worked at Camp Livingston, and I actually lived with him for a summer. And during that time, I really learned that Roey really loves community, he loves sharing his skills, and he really likes making people laugh and also laughing at himself. So I'm so excited that we get to learn from Roey. Roey is the Senior Director of Immersive Experiences at Moisha House, where he's created peer-led retreats, Camp 999, and Expedition 9. And I'm just really excited for us to all learn from Roey today.
Thanks, Mike. It's nice to be on a Zoom with you. Feels like we're in the same room. Hey, everyone. I'm Roey. It's nice to meet you, see some of familiar faces. Just briefly about me, I was born in Israel, moved to California at the age of 10. And until that time, my dad was in the hospitality industry. So he managed a few different hotels around Israel, and we lived in the hotel. So I used to intern at the front desk when I was like 4 years old in a bib. So hospitality and customer service is ingrained in my blood. Yeah, the sweet life of Roey for sure. And moved to California at the age of 10, and I was just telling Erica I lived about an hour outside of LA in a place that didn't have many Jewish people, and every summer, my family and I, we would go back to Israel to see family and friends and such. So I didn't really have a Jewish community in the States growing up until I showed up in college. And I went to UC Berkeley, which is quite a charged environment to be introduced, to the American Jewish community and the things that people like to talk about. So I spent some time at Hillel. I co-founded a student organization there that tried to link activists in Israel together with those in Oakland, working for housing rights and food justice rights and things like that. And then during the summers in college, I started working at Jewish summer camps, which was something I was pretty unfamiliar with. Ended up living in a room with Mike, and then graduated in 2011, which was a difficult time to be picky about jobs in the country. And I was just in that phase of life where I was applying to anything I could find on Idealist. And Moisha House was one of the few places that I'm pretty sure ever even called me back. And that started a journey of almost a decade working in the Jewish nonprofit space, specifically with young adults. And it's not something I knew I was going to set out to do. My first job at Moisha House involved like collecting the faxes and scanning them into a Google Drive and things like that, and slowly found my way into program development and the creation of specifically, Moisha's mission is to build organic, hyperlocal community among young adults. So you know, pre-COVID, about 5-6 years ago, young adults, the Jewish community had, let's say, like a glut of retreat options, if we can, right? If you were a young adult, maybe even a teen, I'm not so sure, in the States, you could probably find a Jewish Shabbaton on any kind of topic. It was probably subsidized, and it was probably somewhere nice in the States as an incentive to go. And at Moish House, we tried to come up with a way that felt a bit more true to us, where we could sort of outsource that um, power of building community in a retreat space to young adults themselves. So I was hoping today to just spend a few minutes talking about this goal setting framework we created essentially for guiding young adults through building programs. I hope you'll find it relevant for the space that you are in. It's a relatively simple to understand tool, and the goal was, how do we get young adults to think about an immersive retreat opportunity as a way to transform their participants and to transform themselves. And this doesn't have to be a massive life-changing, I'm going to quit my job and move to India kind of transformation. But if you can move your participants in any sort of way from point A to point B in their lives through asking some big questions, perhaps you've infused your weekend, your retreat, your program with some more intention. So that's the plan for today. Is just to share this this little tool that we've taught to hundreds of young adults, and we now use it sort of as a standard in Moishe House when we're building new programs where the goal is to institute some kind of meaningful change for the participants. How can we assess if we're set up to do that? If our schedule, if our program, and more specifically our goals are setting us up for success to do that. So whenever we start planning any kind of immersive program, we always start with our goals, and this is how we do it. There's only 2 slides on this. All right, so you're not in for a serious PowerPoint here. So this program we developed, it's called Retreatology, the art of Jewish retreat making. Participants from all over the world can come for this meta retreat weekend where they learn how to craft their own retreat, and then can apply for a grant for up to $5,000 to put on a hyper local retreat for their community. I think Amanda's led a few, if I'm not mistaken, and perhaps even taught at a few. They can do it on any topic that they find relevant and meaningful to themselves, and guided by Moish House staff and with a Jewish educator. Young adults create a weekend Shabbaton, much like we did back in the teen space, just with less adult supervision. Or they're all adults supervising each other. Since we launched this program, we've had about 400 of these peer-led retreats take place around the world. Last year or the year before, at an average of about 2 or 3 a weekend. So this is this framework that I keep alluding to. This is where it comes from. The team at Moish House, myself, have put it together. But it's very simple. We call it our ABC goal setting framework. A for affect, B for behavior, and C for cognition. So when we set out goals, typically what I'll hear, a first instinct from someone who is trying to create a program or a retreat, is they want to build community. That'll be their goal, right? They want to build community and they want to have fun. And maybe they want to do some group bonding. Those are goals. That'll be like the first thing I'll hear time and time again. And these are the kinds of questions I ask to try and dig deeper to see if we can really get at meaningful content and choose programs and activities and schedules that align with more specific goals. So this ABC framework, affect, behavior, and cognition, has 3 guiding questions. What do I want people to feel? The affect. What do I want people to do? Be the behavior. And what do I want people to know? So for example, when participants come to Retreatology, the goals of that whole weekend long experience, right, is to feel motivated and confident in their abilities to put on a retreat for their peers. It can be scary. Behavior, we want them to actually go out into the world and do it. And cognition, knowledge, we want them to feel or to know how to do it, how to craft a budget, how to hire an educator, how to book a venue, how to build a schedule that aligns with goals, how to craft goals. And so when I'm coming up with a new program or when the team is working on something new, we start by asking ourselves these questions, narrow down some of the answers that we come up with to something that feels reasonable for a weekend or however long the experience is. And then when we go to build the schedule, we're constantly assessing different programs and activities up against the answers to these questions, up against the goals. So instead of starting with a template that's Friday to Sunday, and I plot in meals at the times I know when I need it, and then I build a schedule around that, I'll start by asking myself, how do I feel like I can craft an experience that is most geared towards the goals that we've laid out? So that's really the basics. I see there's some questions coming in, so that's great. So this is for how the organizers should experience it, not for the participants of the program. Say more.
Hi. I guess I assumed that those 3 questions were going to be what the organizers, even if they're the lay people, the young adults, that they want participants to feel. But then you said something, and I thought maybe it was what you wanted the young adult organizers to feel or to be experiencing. So can you clarify?
Yeah, sorry, your instinct is correct. Those are questions that we, as the organizers, try and answer for what we want the participants to experience. Where I maybe got confusing was in trying to give the example of that retreat that we've created, Retreatology. I was giving like examples to how I would answer those questions for that weekend long retreat.
So you have a retreat to the young adults how to lead retreats. Okay. Yeah, that was it. Yeah. Okay.
I was gonna say, Paula, that it's like a meta thing. that's the thing that tricked you up, is that he's presenting it through the retreat to train about doing retreats.
Okay, so just to put a fine point on it, are you how to lead the retreat for the leaders, or just both in general?
It's how to lead a retreat for the leader. So as another example, Amanda or other folks that have come on Retreatology in the past, they have a wide array of topics that they want to try and create their own retreats on, whether it be food justice, social justice, Jewish embodiment, Torah and yoga, and sort of vague themes like that. These types of questions help us guide them through a distillation of what their idea is, so that we start with some intention and goals and then build activities around that. Someone might come up and say, I want to do a whole retreat on cooking, which is really an activity and not a goal. So it's a way to sort of back people up so that you can set some intention for your program with the purpose of creating some change. So that's, not every program we do and every 45 minutes needs to have like a deep analysis of an ABC framework. But if we're crafting an experience whose goal is to initiate some kind of transformation, we find that this is a helpful starting point.
So you're teaching them how to be educators.
Essentially. Yeah, essentially.
Good. That's good to know for them.
It's
Can I just add?
yeah,
just to add, I think it's just a lot more intentional. Instead of saying, okay, we're going to have a teen weekend, we're going to have meals at this time, we're going to do breakout groups at this time, and we're going to learn this thing about Israel. It's like, why are we here? What is the actual goal of our time together, and how are we spending it?
There's something very powerful, Paula, in sort of giving people permission, like you're saying, to be the crafters of their own learning experience. And I'm sure that that's even more visceral for those working with teens and even younger folks than I am. I'm not sure, but that would be my gut, is that they were born looking up and learning everything they wanted when they wanted it, and not necessarily looking at a traditional educator to guide them through the way.
Okay, I have to go, but it's not a program. My kid's taking her driving exam, so so far so good. So thank you.
The other thing that I was just thinking about sharing is I've actually used this model both with teens as well as with adults who are planning like their adult learning experiences. And what I think is really useful for me is like these are really great guiding questions when you're working with teen coordinators or a committee, and it really helps you narrow down on what they want to have happen. Because I think so often we start our program planning process by being like, oh, we want to do this thing because it happened before at something that I went to. And instead of starting from there, we can have a little more intentionality behind what's going on during our program.
Yeah, I was going to highlight exactly what you said, Mike, and Amanda used the word before, is intentionality. And I think when we can put intention, but use a framework to work within, it allows us to create programs and opportunities and experiences that are much deeper and richer than simply putting something on. So I think thinking about, and I love that the emotion is part of it, the behavior is part of it, the cognition. So you really have sort of the whole body, mind experience with, with opportunities that you're creating.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Well said. And shout out to the book recommendation in the chat from Amanda. That's all I'd really planned. I'm happy to answer questions or open a conversation or anything else that's on people's mind.
I'm gonna put you on the spot for a minute. And I know that you don't work directly in the teen space, but there are two, I think, big commonalities between your work and the work that we're doing in the teen space. And that is people have the option to choose to participate or not. And they have a lot of really good things that are going on and a lot of offerings around them that they can take advantage of. Can you maybe think a little bit on like organizationally, how is it that you help create opportunities that young adults who aren't really looking for a connection to, a religious organization or religion in general and blah, blah, blah. Like, how do you help them see that this is an important thing that they should prioritize in their lives?
So when I started at Moist House, a big part of the conversation in the young adult space was around this culture of free, that people weren't going to come unless stuff was free, unless you get free dinner, free alcohol, free trip to the retreat, whatever it might be. there were a lot of conversations around, yeah, what was dubbed the culture of free. And um, we decided to put this theory to the test with Camp 999, which is a Jewish summer camp for adults. And a couple years ago, when we launched it, Amanda was also there for the first one. Um, there was this sort of nascent space of like these digital detox weekends, they were called. There was like this emerging, go out, not just for a retreat, but with the purpose of disconnecting from your laptops and your phones. And people were paying a lot of money for it. And we sort of had, this sense that this culture of free stereotype maybe, or assumption maybe, isn't entirely true, because my peers are going to New York for a weekend. They're going to Coachella. They're going to Burning Man. They're going on a ski trip. Like, they're doing stuff that costs money. They're just choosing to not have that be maybe Jewish things. So part of the theory behind Camp 99 was, can you create an experience that is meaningful enough that people are willing to pay for it? And we launched it with a ticket price of about $325, which is about, the cost of a music festival. And certainly there were no comps to it in the young adult Jewish space. And in the second year, we sold out at about 300 people, 250 people. So it's to answer your question in the sense that you can't really make people see it, but what you can try and do is to offer experiences that are meaningful to them. And that is where people tend to gravitate. And maybe by asking ourselves some like deeper questions about what it is that people want and are looking for, we can try and craft those kinds of experiences that attract who we're trying to attract.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
I'm super curious. I'm so excited to be here and to talk to Roey, because he is so brilliant and such an incredible immersive experiences director. So I also have to leave in a couple minutes because I have another meeting at 3:30. But what I'm curious about, Roey, is, I feel like you're able to really hyper focus on our age demographic, on the millennial age demographic. And I'm wondering, like, what are one or two things you've learned with our demographic that we might be able to also apply to teens? Or, like, what are some ways we can look at how to explore what experiences teens do want? It's certainly something that we really struggle with in our community because we have virtually zero teen engagement. It's very, very low. And I think everyone's just kind of like, what do we do? Like, where do we even start? So any guidance around like how to really hone in on figuring out how to make those choices? Moishe House, did you guys do a big study? Like, did you bring in consultants to kind of help guide this? Like, what would you recommend for this different age demographic?
So the one thing I learned, I think, the hard way, and again, apologize if this is like very well known in the teen space, but um, for me, there was a shift in young adult education a few years ago that was like, you can't treat people like idiots because they have the internet and they will look up everything that you say and do. So for me, that kind of learning came around the Israel space, where when I was graduating college, like Hasbara was still sort of a big engagement tool. And then, over the last 10 years, it became much more difficult to do that in the usual sense. I think in part because of the internet. So that's one thing that I'm guessing really applies to teens, probably even more so to young adults, is that you can't treat them not just like you can't treat them like idiots, but you have to sort of come from a place of assuming that they are going to check everything that you say and talk about. And that leads, I think, to education that's asking a lot more questions than it is, telling and dictating. In terms of studies, we at Moishe House haven't really done any big demographic studies. There's a lot of other organizations that like to do that, and that put out good stuff. I am a firm believer in meeting people where they're at. And that just requires constantly changing tactics, because once you get comfortable, it's not so new anymore. And I do think that's where people go. So, like, for example, I have this one idea. There's this whole emerging field of sociology around the selfie as like a really serious identity forming project, that it's like a real crucial part of how young people perceive themselves, is this like this constant like photo sharing of themselves. And Instagram museums are really popular. So I think it would be really cool to see the first Instagram museum like on Judaism or on modern spirituality or something like that. It's something that just like it just looks different. Like, it won't look like people sitting in a circle around a text sheet. It just won't. It won't look like people standing around a room learning how to bake challah or babka or something, because they're going to do that with their YouTube or their New York Times cooking app at home. So something like that. Yeah, I think it just requires like a constant changing of tactics to just go where they are and not try and constantly prove to them that you are where they should be.
Thank you. That's super helpful. And I also just want to add something that I thought was really great with what you shared about Camp 999, this Jewish adult summer camp that hadn't ever existed before, was, and maybe there's something with this younger generation that is similar, that they really felt like millennials wouldn't pay for meaningful experiences, and that millennials aren't philanthropists, that we, all of these things around money that just simply aren't true. So I think it's also worth, when we're working with teens, kind of thinking about that too, that maybe they're actually willing to do some things that we think that they might not do. So just wanted to share that. I have to go, but thank you so much, Erica. Great to see you, Roey.
Bye, Amanda.
Roey, would you mind talking a little bit about how you determine like the level of Jewish content in programs? I'm thinking specifically about Expedition Nye, which I was so impressed with that you and your team put together, which from my perspective was a deeply Jewish experience, but it wasn't really clear from the surface level that that was what the experience was. So I was wondering if you would talk a little bit about how that was designed, especially the Jewish elements of it.
Yeah, so briefly, right at the start of COVID, when we realized we couldn't do Camp 999, we decided to put on this program called Expedition Nye, which was a 4-week-long virtual color war. The Maccabi is like one of the more popular aspects of Camp 999. And every week for 4 weeks, we put up about 100 challenges online that people could complete and submit for prizes. The Jewish and the challenges ranged from create a funny dance on TikTok, to clean up the street outside your house, to light some Shabbat candles, to show us how you creatively count the Omer, these kinds of things. I'll say that I don't think it's possible to determine how deep of a Jewish engagement that was. For some people, it may have been something that they do regularly and they were trying to just win some cash. For some folks, it might have been like the first time they were counting the Omer, or like doing something for Shavuot. And that kind of information is It's like harder to capture, and it's harder to evaluate like what the meaning is of something like that. And part of meeting people where they're at, which is like on TikTok and on Instagram, um, is being willing to sort of let that go. So for us, like one of the goals for this experience was to get a front row seat to how young adults around the world were practicing their Judaism in the early days of COVID. And we have hundreds of videos of young adults from all over the world counting the Omer, lighting Shabbat candles, doing Havdalah over Zoom with their friends and family. Um, and the intrinsic motivation for why they chose to do that, I think, matters less than the fact that they did it and spent time out of their day choosing to do it. Like, that is them showing up how we ask them to show up.
Do you find then that their positive feelings from that experience, even if it's at that level, then encourages them to do more organizationally?
I mean, we'd hope so, and there is some data that definitely shows that. I mean, at least at Moishe House, that once you get them through the door, they're more likely to come back in one capacity or another. So my job has really been to open as many doors as you can. And we had about, I think, under 1,000 players in the first round of Expedition I, and 2/3 of them had never heard of Moishe House or camp before. And then we repeated it in the summer in a different format where it was only a week long, and instead of playing for cash prizes for yourself, teams played for nonprofits. And the Arava Institute in Israel ended up winning $5,000 from the winning team, and that was about 25% people who had never heard of Moish House or Camp 999. So these are people that then you later hope show up to camp or go visit their local Moishe House. Yeah, it's been my job to try and open doors, and then it's up to people what they want to do.
I have one more question, another organizational question, but like within the youth movement, not like specific movement, but like the youth field as a whole, I think it's our job to help usher teens from whatever that teen space is into some kind of Jewish engagement post, high school graduation. Are you guys working with Hillels to help sort of extend that bridge from college campus then into young adulthood? Or how do you see that being helpful?
Yeah, so of course, many Moish House residents and community leaders probably held some kind of leadership role in their Hillel on college campus, or perhaps younger as teens. Many of our employees, come from those ranks. So there is a partnership, but again, I think it's the perfect pipeline that the Jewish community has always dreamt of. I think is something that is pretty hard to actually actualize, and it's more on at Moishe House, we take the responsibility on ourselves, not to sound repetitive, but to create the kinds of experiences and places that people want to come to. And that'll, at the end of the day, be the ultimate measure of whether we're doing a good job or not.
Good. Any final thoughts?
I really appreciate you guys inviting me today. Thank you so much.
You. No, we appreciate you being here. I think it's always interesting to hear people's stories and to also kind of understand some of the inner workings of the work that they're doing, and then being able to apply it or at least imagine how we may be able to use some of those lessons and best practices to the work that we're doing with teens. I put in the chat a link to the JTeen Facebook, or sorry, the JTeen website, which will take you here. If you haven't heard already, we have our conference, a virtual conference this May 23rd to the 26th. We'll be focusing on several different areas that you can see in front of you. I know the writing's kind of small, but you can click on the link and see it a little bit bigger. But we have an incredible number of professionals who will be leading us in a variety of really important teen-focused conversations that I think we will all be able to learn from and take back to our communities. And the great thing about a virtual conference is that you can tune in and show up whenever you want as your interest and thank you, as your interest and availability is there. And we'll also have some social programs and some networking opportunities as well. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Thank you, Roey. We're so appreciative of the time that you gave us and your expertise, and we hope to be able to connect with you moving forward too.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for the invite, Mike.
Thanks, Roey. Really appreciate it.
Anytime.
Thank you, Mike.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.